Good morning. The time is now 10 a.m. and I will call the meeting of the District of Columbia Board of Ethics and Government Accountability to order. I'm Bega Chairperson Norma Hutcheson. And this meeting is being held at the Board of Ethics and Government Accountability at 1030 15th Street Northwest, Suite 700 West, and virtually. Joining me for this meeting are board members Charles Nottingham, Darrin Sobin, and Melissa Tucker. Together, the four of us constitute a quorum for this meeting. Since it was first posted, there have been no changes to the agenda, so I ask the board to please take a look at the agenda, and then we'll need a motion to adopt the agenda.
Make that motion to adopt the agenda.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the agenda for today's meeting. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Hearing none, the board has adopted the agenda for today's meeting. Before us today are the October 2025 draft meeting minutes, and will a member please make a motion to consider the approval of these meeting minutes?
I'm looking at it. It says we met virtually on September 11th, 2025.
No,
in the first paragraph. Is that?
That would need to be a change.
Yeah.
Right. We met on October 2nd, virtually and in person. So that needs to be corrected.
Well, with the correction to October 2nd, I would move to accept the meeting minutes of the October 2nd meeting, provided that we change the September 11th date in the opening paragraph to October 2nd.
Okay. Is there a second?
Just want to note that I'm going to recuse myself since I wasn't at last month's meeting.
Okay.
And I'm in the same situation.
Okay, then we
It looked to be in order. I don't see any other typos or anything, but not having been there.
Okay, then we'll have to approve these at the next board meeting. Then we'll move to the next item on the agenda, and that's a report from the Office of Open Government. Director Allen, please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson Hutcheson and members of the board. I am Niquelle Allen, Director of Open Government, and I am pleased to present this report on the activities of the Office of Open Government, or OOG. Our mission is to ensure that all persons receive full and complete information concerning the affairs of the District of Columbia government and the actions of its officials. Since the last board meeting, OOG has continued its work to ensure that the District of Columbia government's operations are transparent, open to the public, and promote civic engagement. To that end, OOG has enforced the Open Meetings Act, advised on the Freedom of Information Act requirements, and provided training on those transparency laws. OOG has proudly served as advocates for an open and transparent government. First in my report is Open Meetings Act, OMA, and Freedom of Information Act, FOIA advice. Advisory opinions. OMA advisory opinion, Smothers Elementary School Local School Advisory Team, number OOG 2024-0012. On October 8th, I issued this opinion in response to a complaint which alleged that Smothers Elementary School Local School Advisory Team, or LSAT, nominated a chairperson to Smothers LSAT outside of a regular LSAT meeting and canceled one of its publicly noticed meetings without notice to the public of the cancellation. I found that the Smothers LSAT alleged nomination or selection of a chairperson on a disputed date does not violate the Open Meetings Act because the alleged nomination or selection process does not raise facts or circumstances covered in the Open Meetings Act. The advisory opinion explains that the unique situation of Smothers LSAT being reduced to one or two members is one that warrants further examination, but insufficient and conflicting information prevents such within the context of the OMA. I found that the meeting notice issue falls within the OMA, but the evidence was inconclusive on which to decide whether the Smothers LSAT violated the OMA by not providing notice to the public of the cancellation of one of its meetings. Notwithstanding the LSAT reduced membership and the insufficiency of information, I advise that the LSAT must provide notice of meetings in accordance with the OMA. The LSAT must create a record as best as possible of the selection of members and create a process in such situation and make it available to the public. Based on the Office of Open Government's own investigation, I found that the Smothers LSAT violated the Open Meetings Act by not doing the following: publishing meeting minutes, information on access to record of meetings for the year 2024 as required by DC Official Code Section 2-578B, publishing a schedule of its meetings for the school year 2024 to 2025, and providing meeting notices for the school year 2024 to 2025 in accordance with DC Official Code Section 2-5761. I have determined that based on Smothers Elementary School LSAT's violation of the OMA Notice of Meetings and Open Meetings requirements, this LSAT must take OMA training within 60 days of receipt of the advisory opinion to avoid further corrective action. A copy of the complaint and advisory opinion have been added to Dropbox. The next is a letter regarding OMA advisory opinion to the District of Columbia Zoning Commission, OOG-2024-003. On May 8th, I issued advisory opinion OOG 2024-003 pursuant to 3 DCMR Section 100400 and concluded that the District of Columbia Zoning Commission practice of holding standalone closed sessions violated the Open Meetings Act because its practice provided inadequate notice of the Commission's closed meetings and was inconsistent with the protocol that public bodies must follow to lawfully enter into closed executive sessions as set forth in DC Official Code Section 2-575C. On October 21st, I provided the complainant and the Commission with a letter confirming that the Commission has collaborated with the Office of Open Government to rectify this inconsistency and has, to my satisfaction, fully done so. OOG considers the matter resolved and now closed. A copy of the letter has been added to Dropbox. OMA Advisory Opinion, Board of Trustees for iDream Public Charter School, number OOG-2025-0026. On October 29th, I issued this advisory opinion in response to a complaint which alleged that the iDream Public Charter School Board had not provided meeting location or links to its meeting, and the last meeting minutes was published in December 2024. The board relinquished its charter at the end of school year 2024 and 2025 and is currently not in operation. I recognize that the allegation in the complaint is moot, but decided to address the matter and issue an advisory opinion for the benefit of stakeholders of active boards of trustees for public charter schools, and should iDream Public Charter School Board resume operation under a new charter agreement. I found that iDream Public Charter School Board violated the Open Meetings Act by 1, not providing a location or login information and links to its meetings, and 2, not posting its January 8th, 2025 meeting minutes within the statutorily required 30 business days on iDream Public Charter School's website and or the central meeting calendar. The advisory opinion takes notice that prior to relinquishing its charter, the board corrected the issues in part by posting its 2025 meeting minutes on the school's website, and the chairperson, in response to the complaint, stated her resolve to ensure that all links to the board meetings will be published in a timely manner. The last advisory opinion is OMA advisory opinion, dismissal of complaint regarding DC Fire and Emergency Medical Services, DC FEMS, number OOG-2025-0060. On November 4th, I issued this opinion in response to a complaint about the alleged misconduct of a DC FEMS employee. I dismissed the complaint because it concerned a personnel matter that did not raise issues within the Director of Open Government's authority under the Open Meetings Act. The complainant was referred to the Office of Fire and Emergency Medical Services Chief and the DC FEMS Office of Accountability. Next in my report is informal advice. Since the last board meeting, OOG has responded informally via email, telephone, or teleconference to requests for assistance as follows: 9 requests for Open Meetings Act advice, 7 requests for FOIA advice, and 14 requests for technical assistance with open-dc.gov. Next is meeting monitoring.
Director, I'm sorry to interrupt. Before we move on, just in case I forget, what was the nature of the misconduct in the DC FEMS case with the employee?
It was an incident at someone's house, and they made various allegations against an individual officer for things that they had done. I can talk to you more about it in private, since it was a detailed personnel matter. It was clearly outside of the scope of what we do.
So it was outside of the scope of what you do, but is it outside of the scope of what Director Cooks does?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
I'll provide you with it.
I believe that was, Asia, I believe that was the case you actually sent to me, wasn't it? Because you knew it, you figured it wasn't an ethics matter. Yes.
Open meetings theme.
It had, correct.
Okay. Well, we can talk about it in the executive session then. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, next is meeting monitoring. OOG staff attends public bodies meetings in person and remotely to ensure compliance with the Open Meetings Act. They also inspect public bodies websites and the Office of Open Government central meeting calendar for public meeting notices and records. OOG's attorneys provide legal advice on OMA compliance and take corrective action if necessary. Since the last board meeting, OOG's legal staff have attended 11 public body meetings. As a result of monitoring, 2 corrective measures were communicated. The public bodies failed to publish a complete meeting notice, which should have been included in the agenda and regulatory statement pursuant to the Open Meetings Act and its regulations. Next in my report is training and outreach. Ethics Week 2025, first sessions attended by OOG. Sessions facilitated by the Office of Government Ethics, or OGE, from October 14th to 17th. The Board of Ethics and Government Accountability held its annual training seminar, Ethics Week 2025, Keeping Government Transparent and Ethical. OOG chief staff and I attended the OGE facilitated seminars in person and virtually, which included a variety of ethics courses, which focus on outside employment, donations, gifts, and ethics for government attorneys, presented by OGE. The Office of Open Government's team attended all training courses, and a list of the courses, including details regarding which OOG members attended each of the sessions facilitated by OGE, is included in Dropbox for your information. Next, I'll discuss the webinars and seminars that we provided. First is introduction and opening remarks from the director. On October 16th, I opened a full day of FOIA and OMA courses at Ethics Week 2025 and provided a brief overview of the Office of Open Government and the office's activities and accomplishments. OOT staff attended the session in person and virtually. The next training is the responsible use of AI tools in government training. On October 16th, I facilitated this training session. The course covered the basic characteristics of artificial intelligence technologies, including generative AI and large language models, and the impact of AI on government records, FOIA, and government service. The training session also provided useful tips for employees using the AI tools and performing their duties and their duty to preserve confidentiality confidential and proprietary information when using AI tools. OOG staff attended this training in person and virtually. Next, the history of the Open Meetings Act and recent changes to the Open Meetings Act training. On October 16th, Attorney Advisor Brandon Lewis presented this course that provided an overview of the history of the Open Meetings Act and discussed recent changes made to the Act by the D.C. Council. I, along with OOG staff, attended this session in person and virtually. Overview of recent FOIA and OMA advisory opinions and advice. On October 6th, Chief Counsel Louis Neal facilitated this webinar. The course discussed recent FOIA and OMA advisory opinions and advice issued by OOG. I, along with OOG staff, attended this training virtually. Introduction to the Freedom of Information Act webinar. This webinar on October 16th was facilitated by Attorney Advisor Joan Lelma. The training session provided a brief history of DC FOIA and an overview of the DC FOIA exemptions and discussed practical topics for FOIA officers. There was a question and answer segment following specific topics, and I, along with OOG staff, attended this training virtually. Last, for Ethics Week, is the Parliamentary Procedure webinar. This webinar was on October 16th as well and hosted by Susan Leahy, founder of Robert's Rules Made Simple. This course covered the basics of Robert's Rules of Order and focused on the 7 fundamental motions. The webinar instructed participants on how to make motions in accordance with Robert's Rules, including when it is appropriate to use motions in meetings. The webinar also covered board dynamics and leadership. I, along with OOG staff, attended the training virtually. Open Meetings Act training for District of Columbia Public School staff. On October 20th, Attorney Lelma facilitated this training for staff members of DCPS who work closely with the district's local school advisory teams. Details instructions for complying with the OMA and recent amendments by the Open Meetings Clarification Temporary Amendment Act of 2025 to the OMA were provided. Chief Counsel Neal also attended this training virtually. Open Meetings Act webinar for the Department of Energy and Environment. On October 21st, Attorney Advisor Anthony J. Skirbo facilitated an Open Meetings Act webinar for staff members of the Department of Energy and the Environment. The session provided a description of OOG's functions and an in-depth examination of the application of the OMA to public bodies. Open Meetings Act training for District of Columbia U.S. Senator Anit Kane. On Attorney Skirbo did OMA training for the senator for the District of Columbia. The training discussed the application of the statute to public bodies, more so the new Columbia Statehood Commission. Digital Government Institute Annual Public Sector Digitization Best Practices Workshop. On October 23rd, Attorney Lelma attended this workshop, which was virtual, facilitated by Christine Miranda, I'm not sure how to present this, Igaziria, head of digitization at the University of Chicago Library, and Michael Smoyer, president of DGI. The presentation focused on essential aspects of managing electronic records in the digital age. Designed specifically for government professionals, the workshop provided an overview of best practices for digitizing records with an emphasis on how to leverage the University of Chicago Node, a integrated digital collections platform, bringing together digital collections at the University of Chicago and enhancing digital research beyond the university. The federal aspect of the workshop that would have addressed digitization of records in accordance with the Code of Federal Regulations was absent due to the ongoing federal government shutdown. Artificial Intelligence Listening Session, advisory groups on AI Values Alignment, AIVA. On November 3rd, I participated in the district's AI Public Listening Session hosted by the Office of the Chief Technology Officer on behalf of AIVA, of which I am a member. Nancy Hateman, the Chief Procurement Officer for the district, provided a presentation regarding agency's procurement of AI tools. AVIA also heard from DC residents and stakeholders in the community regarding the use and deployment of AI in DC government and held a question and answer session. The next portion of my report is the litigation and legislative update. First is litigation. Chicago Justice Project versus the District of Columbia, case number 2022-CA-001175B in DC Superior Court. I previously reported on this case in which the Chicago Justice Project filed suit to compel the Metropolitan Police Department to release certain records concerning the gang tracking and analysis system in a dispute regarding an advance fee that MPD demanded for its FOIA review and a similar amount that the Chicago Justice Project demanded in attorney's fees. An oral motions hearing was held on September 25th. The court heard the parties' arguments and has taken the motion for in-camera review under advisement. The court set a remote status hearing for January 23rd, 2026 to allow the court time to rule on the motion and for the parties to continue discussing a resolution in line with their settlement agreement. A copy of the scheduling order has been added to Dropbox, and OOG staff will continue to monitor this case. DC Open Government Coalition versus the District of Columbia, case number 2022-CAB-007251 in DC Superior Court. I have also previously reported on this case that involves the DC Open Government Coalition's lawsuit against the District of Columbia seeking an accounting of the backlog of public records requests submitted through the FOIA Express public access link. Since the last board meeting, the case has proceeded with the parties filing motions. As background, on September 12th, the district filed an opposition to the plaintiff's motion for summary judgment and reply in support of the district's motion for summary judgment. On September 26th, the DC Open Government Coalition filed its reply to the district's opposition to summary judgment. Copies of the filings are in Dropbox, and a motions hearing has been scheduled for December 2nd, 2025. OOG staff will continue to monitor this case. America First Legal Foundation versus Jameson Greer, case number 24-5168 in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. This was a case before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia in which the America First Legal Foundation sued to compel the Office of Special Counsel to investigate whether a federal agency arbitrarily denied AFL's Freedom of Information Act request. The court dismissed AFL's claims on the merits. The Court of Appeals concluded that AFL lacks Article III standing to pursue the claims. The court found that an organization lacks standing to sue OSC to compel it to investigate the Department of Justice FOIA policy, and that deprivation of procedural right without some concrete interest that is affected by the deprivation is insufficient to confer Article III standing. The OSC's failure to investigate the DOJ for its failure to turn over requested documents is not a concrete injury, since any causal connection between the failure to conduct the investigation and the failure to comply with the document request is speculative, and the appellant has not shown how a favorable judgment would lead to redress. The court found that if 5 U.S.C. Section 1216 requires OSC to investigate FOIA violations, it does not create any entitlement for the requesting parties to receive information. The case was vacated and remanded. The last case is Campaign for Accountability versus the U.S. Department of Justice, case number 24-5163, also in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. This is a case in which the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia found that the Freedom of Information Act does not require the government to disclose the Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel opinions that resolve interagency disputes concerning the adjudication or determination of private rights or interpret non-discretionary legal duties. It is in the court's decision that informational injury is sufficient to establish standing for claims brought under the reading room provision of FOIA. The OLC legal opinions related to the adjudication of private rights, the interpretation of non-discretionary duties, or the resolution of interagency disputes are not working law subject to disclosure under FOIA's reading room provision. The Court of Appeals affirmed that the District Court's decision that CFA's requests for opinions concerning private rights and non-discretionary legal duties are not disclosable under FOIA, and reversed the Court's decision that CFA was entitled to see opinions resolving interagency disputes. Next is legislation. First is legislative action regarding climate change. On October 21st, 2025, Bill 26-0066, the Youth Advisory Council on Climate Change and Environmental Conservation Establishment Act of 2025, passed the Council on final reading and would create a new public body to provide an organized youth perspective on various issues that impact climate change, subject to the Open Meetings Act and conducting its business according to Robert's Rules of Order. This bill also calls for the provision of informational material provided by the Office of Open Government concerning the duties of Youth Climate Council members. The bill passed unanimously on both readings and has been transmitted to the mayor with a response due by November 12, 2025. The bill and committee report remain in Dropbox. Legislative action regarding the Freedom of Information Act. On July 28th, as you know, the Council passed the fiscal year 2026 Budget Support Emergency Act of 2025, Bill 26-0340, which included the Freedom of Information Clarification Emergency Amendment Act of 2025. The mayor signed the measure on September 3rd, and it expires on December 2nd. On May 27th, Chairman Mendelson introduced Bill 26-0265, the fiscal year 2026 Budget Support Act of 2025. The bill passed unanimously on first reading by a vote of 10-2 on final reading on July 28th. It was signed by the mayor on September 4th, receiving Act number 26-014, and was transmitted to Congress on September 10th. The projected law date is December 17th. Both bills provide the authority for implementing the district's FY26 budget and include the Freedom of Information Clarification Emergency Amendment Act of 2025. The emergency amendment of DC FOIA was introduced to clarify the scope of exemptions and created a new exemption for particular data or records that the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council and the District of Columbia Sentence Commission receive from a court, federal agency, or federally established agency. Copies of the bill remain in Dropbox. Last in my report are administrative matters. FY27 budget formulation kickoff on October 17th. I, along with Director Cooks, Chief of Staff Mitchell, and Administrative Officer Niquelle Allen, attended the kickoff meeting for formulating the FY27 budget hosted by the Office of the City Administrator. The meeting included an update on budget forecasts, information on the hiring freeze and certain waiver requirements that have been suspended, and the budget enhancement, and that budget enhancement requests will not be received for FY27. Bega will meet with the Office of the City Administrator before the end of the calendar year regarding the FY27 budget. This concludes the Office of Open Government's November 6, 2025 report. I'm happy to answer any other questions the board may have.
Thank you, Director Allen. Are there any questions for Director Allen? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is a report from the Office of Government Ethics. Director Cooks, please proceed.
Good morning, Chairperson Hutcheson and members of the board. I'm Ashley Cooks, Director of the Office of Government Ethics. I'm pleased to present this report on the activities of the Office of Government Ethics, OGE. First is an update on the status of OGE investigations. The information reported today regarding OGE's cases will not reflect any status changes that may occur because of actions taken by the board during today's meeting. For open investigations by status, we have a grand total of 77 matters. Open undocketed matters, we have a grand total of 5. Pending state investigations by status, we have 32 matters that are closed pending collection. 3 matters stayed pending DC Superior Court case. 3 matters stayed for OIG investigation. 2 matters stayed for U.S. District Court case for a grand total of 40. For regulatory matters by status, we have 46 matters that are closed pending collection, 866 matters that are open for a grand total of 912. Again, we currently have 77 open investigations and 8 matters that are stayed. The number of open preliminary and formal investigations includes 19 new matters. The investigative team resolved 9 investigations since the board last met. This total does not reflect the number of complaints that were dismissed for a lack of jurisdiction. The quarterly complaint report for quarter 4 of fiscal year 2025, covering the period for July 1st, 2025 through September 30th, 2025, is expected to be published by mid-month to the Bega website with a press release and heat map. Copies will be placed in the Dropbox for the next meeting. Next is an update on training and outreach. First is professional development trainings attended by staff. Human Resources Specialist Megan Stoudemire took training on developing and entering question sets and e-recruitment with the Department of Human Resources. For trainings conducted by staff, since the last board meeting, ODE conducted 6 training sessions, excluding Ethics Week, which included the October monthly ethics training, 2 new employee orientation ethics segments, the quarterly outside employment training, and a hashtag training for the Office of the Attorney General, and the quarterly boards and commissions training. In October, 134 users viewed the recently published outside employment course on the learning management system, and 134 users viewed our full ethics training on the LMS. We also launched course CSR 212, Lobbying District of Columbia Government. 56 district employees completed ethics training using PeopleSoft, and 58 new employees attended new employee orientation and received information on the district's ethics rules in October. For an update on outreach, I'm proud to say that the agency achieved another successful annual ethics symposium. Ethics Week took place on October 14th through the 17th, 2025, and included 2 in-person days, 1 hybrid day, and 1 fully virtual day. This year's theme was Keeping Government Transparent and Ethical, and included sessions designed to encourage employees to comply with the ethics, open meeting, and FOIA laws. New courses such as the responsible use of AI tools in government, outside employment case by case, this or that, is it ethics or personnel matters, and Ethics Week's classics such as Legal Ethics for Government Attorneys and Ethics Game Show were highly attended. OGE also recognized district government ethics counselors who had a high rate of compliance in the 2025 financial disclosure program during my introductory session. Nearly 373 exactly, district employees attended Ethics Week. Next is an update on advisory opinions and advice. For informal advice, OGE's legal staff provided advice for approximately 34 ethics inquiries, which is 11 more than the 23 reporting at the October board meeting. This number does not include responses we have provided to questions regarding the lobbyists and FDS e-filing systems. For formal advisory opinions, OGE has not issued any formal advisory opinions since the last board meeting. Next is an update on legislation and rulemaking. First is the lobbyist registration and reporting. OGE published a notice of proposed rulemaking for the lobbyist section of Bega's regulations on September 26, 2025. The proposed amendment to Title III DCMR changes the date on which each activity report is due from the 10th to the 15th of January, April, July, and October, Section 5803.2. The 30-day comment period closed on October 26th, and we did not receive any comments. The final notice of proposed rulemaking is ready for publication in the DC Register. A copy of the rulemaking was placed in the Dropbox for your review. Financial Disclosure Amendment Rulemaking. On September 27, 2024, pursuant to DC Official Code Section 1-1161.0147I, the Board of Ethics and Government Accountability designated members of 47 boards and commissions as public financial disclosure statement filers. Shortly after the rulemaking was finalized, OGE became aware that many boards had been repealed or merged with other designated boards. As a result, OGE has published a notice of proposed rulemaking, which will correct the list of designated boards and commissions in 3 DCMR Section 5710. Upon approval by this board, the notice will be sent to the DC Register for a 30-day comment period. A copy of the notice of proposed rulemaking was placed in the Dropbox for your review. Next is an update on OGE administrative matters. OGE is in the process of filling vacancies that have recently occurred or that were delayed because of the district government's hiring freeze. First, Acting General Counsel Asia Stewart Mitchell has been selected to serve as Bega's General Counsel. She has served the agency for the past 9 years as attorney advisor, then as supervisory attorney advisor. She has taken the lead and assisted with pivotal agency decisions such as FDS rulemakings and legislation, personnel decisions, advisory opinions, litigation, investigations, and most recently, a Freedom of Information Act appeal. She completed DCHR and George Washington University's Certified Public Manager Program in 2023. Please join me in congratulating Ms. Stewart Mitchell. Second,
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Second, OGE welcomes Courtney Brown as the office's first legal assistant. Ms. Brown is a third-year law student at the University of the District of Columbia. She received her Bachelor's of Science in Criminal Justice from the University of Alabama and a Master's in Public Administration from Kennesaw State University. In addition to her legal work, she participates in Rising for Justice Legal Clinic. Welcome, Courtney.
Welcome, Courtney.
Welcome, Courtney.
Lastly, OGE is in the process of hiring for its program support assistant and investigator vacancies. Next is an update on Public Financial Disclosure Statement, FDS. Pursuant to DC Official Code Sections 1-1162.24 and 1-1162.25, public officials and certain government employees who must file a financial disclosure statement as a means of transparency and to prevent engaging in conduct that violates the Conflict of Interest statute. Bega is responsible for ensuring that employees and public officials who meet the statutory requirement file their annual financial disclosure statement. The 2025 financial disclosure season has closed and the FDS filing deadline was May 15th. OGE opened the season with 10,147 names in the e-filing system. Enforcement measures are now underway, and the financial disclosure enforcement letters were sent to 698 designated filers who failed to file and 50 late filers. Financial disclosure fines were due by October 2nd per the fine letter. Those employees who did not voluntarily pay the fine were sent to the Office of Pay and Retirement Services for wage garnishment. Finally, the DC Council's fall financial disclosure filings are due on November 15, 2025. Next is an update on lobbying registration and reporting, LRR. Pursuant to DC Official Code Section 1-1162.27A, a person who receives compensation or expends funds in an amount of $250 or more in any 3 consecutive calendar month period for lobbying shall register with the Director of Government Ethics and pay the required registration fee. Pursuant to DC Official Code Section 1-1162.30, each registrant shall file a quarterly report concerning the registrant's lobbying activity during the previous quarter. On September 19th, Program Coordinator Stan Kosick opened the e-filing system for the 2025 Quarter 3 reporting. This activity report covering July 1st to September 30th, and those reports were due on October 15th. 473 activity reports were filed, and enforcement for the first and second quarters is underway. Last is an update on public investigations. 24-0016F and 25-002F in Retrayon White. These were former investigations based on 1, the criminal indictment of Ward 8 council member for allegedly agreeing to receive and accepting bribes, and 2, allegations that he violated the code of conduct by failing to file a full and complete public financial disclosure statement. The board scheduled a hearing in 25-0002F to take place on February 5th, 2026. Thank you. This concludes the Office of Government Ethics November 6, 2025 report.
Thank you, Director Cooks. Are there any questions for Director Cooks? The next on the agenda are public comments. Members of the public in attendance at this meeting have an opportunity to make a comment at this time. Are there any? If there are no comments from the public, we will proceed with the next item on the agenda, and that's our executive session. This is a closed session to discuss ongoing confidential investigations pursuant to DC Official Code Section 2-575B14, to consult with an attorney to obtain legal advice and to preserve the attorney-client privilege between an attorney and a public body pursuant to DC Official Code Section 2-575B4A, to discuss personnel matters including the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, performance evaluation, compensation, discipline, demotion, removal, or resignation of government appointees, employees, or officials pursuant to DC Official Code Section 2-575B10, to deliberate on a decision in which the Ethics Board will exercise quasi-judicial functions pursuant to DC Official Code Section 2-575B13, and to discuss contract negotiation strategies pursuant to DC Official Code Section 2-575B2. May I have a motion to enter into executive session?
I'll offer the motion that we enter into executive session.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the board enter into executive session. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And the motion passes unanimously. The board, please move over to the boardroom for the executive session. We will return to this meeting after the conclusion of the executive session to report out any matters decided, finish any other business, and adjourn the meeting. Thank you. The time is now 11:54, and in its executive session, the board approved a negotiated disposition in matter 25-0029 in Ray D. Jackson. Okay. The time is now 11:55, and this concludes the November meeting of the DC Board of Ethics and Government Accountability. Thank you, and have a great holiday.